Okay, so our next keynote is with Dr. Brett Wells. He's the Director of People Analytics at Perceptyx. And over the past 10 years, Brett served as a consultant to leaders at Fortune 500 companies, including Amazon, ExxonMobil, AT&T, Citigroup, Delta Airlines, Estee Lauder companies. He aids them in the creation and implementation of people analytics strategies and solutions. And as you'll be able to clearly tell through his session today, he's a recognized thought leader on emerging workforce trends, employee listening, people analytics, of course, and he's published over 40 peer-reviewed journal articles, book chapters, and conference papers. Most recently, one on data visualization in the Cambridge Handbook of Technology and Human Behavior. We're lucky to have him here with us today. Dr. Wells is going to be talking to us about listening and responding at scale. So everybody, please join me in welcoming Dr. Brett Wells. Brett, go ahead. The virtual floor is yours. Take it away.
All right. Thank you so much, Bobby. It's a pleasure to be with everyone today. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. Give me 1 second. So just a little context real quick about Perceptyx. So Perceptyx, we specialize in employee listening and people analytics. And for over the past 20 years, we've been a trusted partner and get the pleasure of working with over 30% of the Fortune 100, 20% of the Fortune 500 to really help them listen at scale. And what I'm going to talk about today is the lessons learned over the last, call it, year, and the importance of listening has never been greater. And I want to share with some research insights and how companies and the clients we worked with have totally shifted their way of thinking about the employee experience and the importance of asking questions, the right questions at the right time to the right people to really drive and propel that business forward. So let me first start a little bit with the overall framework of employee listening. And even today, over 90% of the clients we work with still leverage a census survey. So that once or maybe twice a year event where all employees are asked a set of questions to really distill the employee experience, what's going well, what are the barriers that are getting in the way to engagement, and how they can drive the needle in those areas to move the business forward. What we've seen over the course of the pandemic, however, are that many of these organizations are augmenting that traditional strategy with all these other moments that matter. So the creation of pulse surveys to really get at those moments like the pandemic and how we work and where we work has dramatically changed overnight, and to get a sense, as an example, from employees of what additional support could they use to be successful. I also think about the racial injustice and the disruptions that caused for organizations, and rightfully so, and how organizations responded by listening to employees. What are they struggling with? How can they help? Excuse me. And then in addition to that, we have our life cycle always on surveys. So as a candidate moves from being a candidate to an employee to ultimately an alumni, how can we listen to see those moments that matter and leverage that data to create a better experience throughout? Excuse me. And then all of this flows into this anticipation framework. So we truly believe that employees are going to engage to a degree they anticipate gaining their desired measure of success. And this positive flywheel effect, we've studied this just in the past 3 years alone for over 12 million responses. And if you think about our database for a minute, there's 12 million responses, hundreds of clients, over 200 survey items. We measure 15 different areas of barriers that can get in the way of engagement across nearly every industry, every demographic that you'd want to slice and dice data. And this real positive flywheel effect comes when we can think of what's getting in the way of success. And that just drives this positive flywheel going forward. So in terms of how our clients have really changed over the course of the year, often I think they got in that traditional mindset of creating a chainsaw. We need a program to check the box and to answer maybe one or two pressing questions. And we're going to use it that one event throughout the year, and that's it. But what we've seen them evolve to and what we encourage them to do is to really create the Swiss Army knife approach. So to start from really the why you're asking questions, why are you collecting this in the first place? What are the business challenges that you're struggling with? And then let's craft a strategy around that and think about each of these tools as a listening moment, whether it's the active collection of data or more that passive collection, maybe leveraging information, this digital exhaust that's coming out of these Zoom meetings that we're always in, or Slack messaging, or a variety of other communications. And then thinking about these two opposing dimensions, you can have your cake and eat it too. So with the increase in pulse surveys, like I mentioned, organizations today, more so than ever before, are really leveraging these pulses to get a depth into the organization. So I think of the benefits that an annual pulse or an annual census creates. It allows a large database for analytics. It's that one time where you can take a check of everyone in the organization and leverage that and connect it to important business outcomes, whether it be like attrition or your diversity, equity, inclusion initiatives, learning and development, whatever that is that you're trying to move the needle on. It's one place where you get everybody into the data set together. But those frequent pulses are a way to dive deeper. And that's where our clients really leveraged it over the pandemic. And to just give you a sense of what we saw, we've collected now nearly 1 million responses across these complementary pulse surveys. And we had the corporate responses to COVID-19. All of a sudden, as a manager thrown into this, how do I manage a remote workforce? How can I better support people managers? How can I create a safe return to work? And we had these specific to industry. Like I mentioned, we did the diversity, equity, inclusion. So all of this created a rich database that we could mine and look for insights and also share that back with our clients. And I just wanted to take a moment and share some of those insights that we were able to uncover as a result. So as an example, like everything, of course, changed in the pandemic. Only 1 out of 20 employees said their work wasn't changed at all. And I would love to meet them and interview them why, because I doubt that's the case. But we saw from historically our engagement benchmarks were very stable leading up to the pandemic, and actually engagement temporarily soared. But now we're seeing issues, and when we look at sentiment and comment analysis, these notions of burnout and fatigue and always being on Zoom, and no longer is it about work-life balance. Now it's about work-life integration, and we're living at work. We're not working to live anymore. So it's very different, this dynamic. We also see this unique divide. So digital natives, those who are very young, are the ones that are actually most likely to want to return to the physical workplace. And I hope this helps your return to work strategy and thinking about questions that you might want to pose your workforce. And this was surprising to me because I thought digital natives, they're the ones that grew up with these iPhones for their entire life practically. If anyone is prepared to work digitally, it's them. But thinking about where they are at in their career, they're expressing concerns of not being seen and being forgotten in the workplace, and thinking about their career trajectories. How can they continue to set up themselves for growth and success and development? So they are the ones that are longing to get back into the workplace. We also have seen that the pandemic's taken quite differential effect on females as compared to males, especially working mothers. With remote working and remote learning all happening under the same roof, parents had to wear many hats, from still being a leader at work, to being mom at home, to being a teacher, to being a short order cook at lunchtime. All of those roles led to quite a bit of disruption. And 60% shared with us that this was creating a lot of burden on their family. Women also felt less supported than their male counterparts in terms of flexibility, understanding from their employers, and working mothers were twice as likely to carry 100% of that childcare responsibilities during the workday compared to men, and were more likely to consider, and actually have, if we look at Bureau of Labor Statistics data, leave the workplace altogether during this pandemic. For those organizations that had to make the difficult decisions to go under layoffs or reductions in force as a result of COVID-19, you left behind those survivors, and those employees had a lot of anxiety and issues to deal with from a employee experience standpoint, being the ones that were able to remain with the organization. They were more likely, as an example, to report unhealthy coping behaviors such as binge drinking or poor behaviors with family than employees who never had to go through a layoff. So while we might intuitively think they're lucky to still have their jobs, it did take a dramatic mental toll on them and their families to be the ones that still remained. This was an interesting year with more disruption and thinking of the elections and politics in the workplace. We took this as an opportunity to pulse employees and get a sense of what's on their minds in terms of that. Interestingly, organizations who encouraged their employees to vote actually saw greater voting turnout, 90% versus 72%. And despite nearly all of us talking about politics in the workplace, still many of us wanted to draw that line and not discuss politics in the workplace, and believe that discussing politics in the workplace can actually hinder their career opportunities, especially when it's in opposition either to popular opinion or their direct manager. And just thinking a little bit about what we're learning even right now in this first quarter into 2021, I thought that the COVID-19 vaccines were this glimmer of hope at the end of the tunnel, and in large part they still are, but employees that are returning to the workplace are not putting all their eggs in the vaccine basket, so to speak. They still are putting higher thought and attention on wet mask wearing, social distancing, frequent cleaning, in terms of making them feel comfortable of returning to the workplace, and not just that vaccine. It ranks much lower. And organizations can require their employees to get the vaccine, but we are finding that can have a lot of potential blowback effects. And our best data suggests that you should encourage employees to get the vaccine, and even giving a small monetary reward or value to getting the vaccine is your best bet to get maximal coverage and effort. There's also a great deal of people shifting their opinions in terms of where they want to continue to work after the pandemic. So if we ask employees where they were at in their minds in terms of where they wanted to work 6 months ago to where they're at today, 75% of us, 3 out of 4 of us, has changed our mind to at least some degree of what we want that to look like. And we're going to be talking in the near future next week on this gender divide, where we're still seeing this bigger effect for women compared to men. They're less likely to want to return to the physical workplace, and those who want a hybrid model are going to be coming into the workplace less frequently. So what are those implications in terms of career progression and promotion and collaboration and communication, all these things that might be impacted when we're not seeing as many women as frequently in the office? And then DE&I was at the heart of this last year for many, if not all of our clients, and some surprising things that we saw in the data. So 2 out of 5 Black African-American employees say they've witnessed racism in the workplace, and 1 out of 5 said they were the actual victim. And then Black employees who agree that their company values racial diversity, they're nearly twice as likely to intend to stay with that company for at least the next 12 months. And although we're not mentioning it here, it also has an effect on those who are not minorities. So white employees, as an example, they're also more likely to stay. Not as dramatically, it doesn't have as large of effect on them, but they're still more likely to want to stay at organizations that value diversity, equity, inclusion than those who do not. And then in partnership with Josh Person, we analyzed over 84 HR practices and related them against a variety of business outcomes from financial to diversity, equity, inclusion, and found that the single greatest predictor of driving business outcomes in terms of DE&I was to listen, hear, and act to employees. And those who do this to a great extent are 4 times more likely to innovate, 7 more times likely to adapt to all the changes we're going through, and nearly 10 times more likely to engage and retain employees. So not only is diversity and inclusion we should do this and it's a feel-good thing and we should do it for so many social reasons, there's also a lot of business reasons behind it too, and financial reasons. So in terms of how we've also kind of rethinking listening strategies, is we're focusing on business problems and not focusing on employee engagement as a project. And where we often lose sight is we think of these data streams as silos that are not connected. But what we're seeing right now is organizations are really leveraging technology and consultants to solve business problems by threading across each of these moments that matter to start answering some really important business questions, such as, why are we losing our early career technical talent? Well, we can see how their onboarding experience, whether done right or done wrong, affects that decision to leave and leave early. We can also see how the early indicators in a poor onboarding experience spill over and have a cascading effect on the experience during the rest of their time with the organization. We can link exit data back to that onboarding data. So all of this needs to really thread together to look at one view of the employee experience and not just segmenting these in silos. And that's another best practice that these organizations are doing. Again, thinking of it as having a Swiss Army knife where it's all on one unit as opposed to a chainsaw that just does one thing and one thing only. And then with that, the real importance of collecting this information is to link it to important business outcomes. So as an example, within our platform, this year was a highlight in terms of our client partners sharing these data with us, not only to see how things vary by industry and being able to slice and dice data, but to really drive better outcomes for them. So I think of, as an example, Citibank. They leveraged this type of model to start thinking about what type of benefits should they offer as a result of COVID-19. How can they change their benefit strategy? As a result, now all of a sudden they have offering sabbatical to employees that have been at Citi for at least 5 years. They've collected a lot of information on diversity, equity, inclusion, and seeing the different experiences based on those groups throughout their career trajectory. We did research with Citi in terms of the employee experience and how does that spill over in terms of the customer experience, which ultimately affects their financial performance. So threading all of that together in one platform and bringing it to life is really impactful to truly tell stories leveraging data. And there were, with the pandemic, I would say that it created a crossroads where organizations got to decide, do we turn left or do we turn right? And I want to showcase some of those examples of where organizations diverted in the woods, so to speak, and the outcomes that ensued. So first, as an example, here we're looking at that crossroad of, should we continue to ask employees during a pandemic questions and get employee experience information? So all of these organizations asked traditionally some type of survey program, but then those that stopped are reported here. Now, those that continued to ask, we're seeing significantly higher business outcomes and significantly higher engagement indices as reported here. And as an example, just look at that intention to stay. That's a 4% difference, which might seem small, but if you could reduce your annual turnover rate by 4 percentage points, for every person you save, you're probably saving anywhere from $10,000 to $20,000 in direct or indirect costs of turnover. That adds up when you start talking about organizations that are 1,000, 10,000, 100,000 employees. It truly can save tens, if not hundreds of millions per year if you can reduce attrition significantly. I mentioned that we partner with Josh Burson, and as I said, we studied over 80 HR practices and really wanted to come out with this playbook of where should organizations focus their efforts during the pandemic to thrive and have that resilience. And again, we saw some organizations across all of these different outcomes. Here are the organizations that did not survey their employees. And you see that they're struggling, to say the least, across all these different types of outcomes, the percentage of organizations. Here are those organizations who continue to ask, but admittedly, they said they did not take swift action based on the results. And lo and behold, the organizations who not only asked, but who responded had the most significant and greatest outcomes. So look at, for example, even that first one is meeting or exceeding their financial targets. Those organizations who are not asking employees or responding at all, only 20% of them, not even 20% of them, are hitting their financial targets. Over double that number of organizations, that percentage of organizations are when they're asking the questions and responding on employee feedback. So right here, it's crystal clear to me that it's part of organizations, their DNA fabric is to ask and leverage employee feedback as a strategic driver of the business. Those organizations were unwavering in their commitment to listen to employees and respond to employees. Now some of the hurdles that can get in the way of responding to employees, this is interesting data from some of my colleagues, and they found that over half of non-Perceptyx clients are unfavorable about the action planning process. And what we're seeing in the market and what we really want to drive and what we tell our clients time and time again is to move towards a action taking platform. And often action planning gets in the way of action taking. And organizations are sharing their sentiment that it's not the survey length, it's not how many times we ask survey questions, it's not the reporting dashboards, it's the action planning process itself that gets in the way of improvement and improving the employee experience. And I couldn't agree more. And we try to make it super simple, and I think you should rip off and duplicate our strategy here, whether you're leveraging our platform or not. Just follow these 3 steps, and it really helps scale responding at scale. So in our platform, we follow this 1, 2, 3 easy steps to responding at scale. And our artificial intelligence for each manager brings to bear a handful of issues that if they addressed and improved the experience there, it's likely to have a spillover effect in other areas that maybe they don't focus as much attention on. So out of 20 to 40 things they should do, it really helps managers to narrow the scope to maybe 3 to 5, and they ultimately have that sense of agency where they can select what they're going to work on, because you want them to be passionate about what they're working on as well. So they select the one thing to focus on. They then select 2 things to do about it. And we pre-populate this and customize this with our clients with these suggestions. And managers can select those 2 things they're going to do. They can then edit it, as managers are really great editors, and we're not asking them to author anything here, but they can if they want to create their own action plan. And then to commit to meeting with their team 3 times to discuss this. And our system will automatically then send them these nudges and reminders of, here's what you committed to doing. Here's when you said you're going to do it. It's right around the corner. Are you ready? Let's keep improving this. Managers then can also send a pulse check to their employees. Here's what I committed to doing. Am I moving the needle on this or not? And get that continuous feedback. And we can set parameters around how often and how many of these they can send out. But it gives, again, them that agency that they're really an owner of the employee experience. And because this is a relatively newer feature, we have great variability in our database of hundreds of clients in terms of those who are leveraging this and those who are not yet. So I want to show you those who are not yet leveraging it. And I call them the ask, ask, ask. And on average, these clients are asking about 3 to 5 surveys a year, whether it's the census or the pulse, the onboarding exit, a combination of them. And 54% of them are using this to some degree, but they're pretty haphazard. They might use it in some places, but not others. And if we look over 3 years of history of their data, only 8% of them have shown significant improvement in their engagement over that 3-year time. And only a quarter of them are at or above their peer group in terms of where they stack rank in the employee experience. Now we compare that to those clients who really leaned in and said, we want to turn this feature on right away, and let's not allow action planning to get in the way of action taking. So they're far more active in this area of responding. Over 70% of them are using this all the time in their listening strategies. Nearly 3/4 of them have improved significantly their engagement over just the last 3 years. And nearly 80% of them are at or above their own industry benchmark and their peer group of where they stack rank. So it's not just about asking the questions. Anyone can ask the questions. It's what you do after the results are known. And in partnership with Josh Burson, we really created this listening at scale framework. So we have to be able to really create a great listening strategy, to be able to collect information at scale, and we can leverage technology to do to get rid of many of these pain points that teams have to deal with. We also have to be able to analyze that data at scale, and then we need to be able to disseminate that information and drive actions with it at scale. So if we focus on these 3 areas, it really sets up success to be able to scale your survey programs and add on new surveys without adding a lot of manual effort on your end to get it going. And if you want, you can download this research report from Josh or at Perceptyx to get a sense of this. So I just wanted to, again, take some time and highlight a couple of these main findings that we had. And number one, everything's changed in the world of work and will continue to change and will continue to be disruptive. So it's important to always keep your mind centered on the North Star, working backwards from success, focusing on the why and the what, and then the how. And with the trends of more frequent surveying and continuous listening, crafting the perfect survey strategy and listening and responding at scale has a lot to do with the action side. So to make sure you're continuously acting on data. And then good companies have continued to ask questions. Like I said, it's just part of their DNA fabric. It's what drives and propels that business forward, and they're swiftly acting on that feedback. And then simple action planning, following that 1, 2, 3 step method is a great way to start getting away from the action planning and more to the action taking and driving and sustaining the improvements over time. And by no means is it too late. If you're in one of those camps right now in terms of, well, we stopped asking or we never asked, it's not too late to start borrowing the best practices from those other organizations and really putting up a listening strategy that's going to move the needle for your business for the right reasons. Well, then I would love to end just by taking any questions that you all have. And by all means, please follow Perceptyx on LinkedIn or Twitter. We're continuously coming out with research insights to help you all really see the way forward.
Okay, yeah, no, thanks. I appreciate that, and we'll definitely have the people follow up on LinkedIn, and then they can get some questions to us to get to you directly as well, because we are a little bit short on time. But I do have a couple questions I wanted to ask, if you don't mind. One, starting off, you had mentioned attention crises. So I was wondering if you could maybe dive into that a little bit more with a definition of attention crises and how that negatively affects the transformation.
Yeah, there's a great deal of cognitive load right now on all of us. We're pulled in so many different directions, and no longer are we working to live. We're really living at work. So this is my office. It's my home. I'm sure it's like that for many of you. So just with the constant distractions and disruptions, it's important to think differently about the world of work and where we work, or working from anywhere, and new return to work strategies or telecommuting policies. So with all this fatigue and burnout, it's important to really sense from employees, what are they struggling with? Where do they need help? How else can the organization support them to be their best selves at work and at home? And that's regardless if they're still in the physical workplace and they're a critical worker, or if they're at home like me in the comfort of their basement. We all have different needs, and that's why it's so important to really ask. Otherwise, you're just guessing in terms of what you think will matter.
And I think here's one that everybody's going to want to know, first and foremost, so they know that they're not alone, and then maybe they'll understand what they can do about it by, checking out your booth and then following you on LinkedIn. But where do clients make the biggest mistakes that you've seen when coming up with their listening strategies?
Yeah, two, I would say. So I like to follow a crawl, walk, run approach into this because it can get pretty complex and difficult. It doesn't have to be, but clients, I think, all go to running with scissors, and they just start adding on all these listening strategies, but they don't start with the why. And as a result, it leads to more fatigue for employees. And it's not the fatigue because they're answering survey questions. Employees will always respond when they see feedbacks taken into account and actions taken. Where you get the fatigue is the inaction fatigue. Mm. And as an example, I can share a quick story. I work with a large manufacturing company, and from their workforce, they found out that there was a glowing need of needing to improve just the coffee in the break room. So what did they do? They actually communicated to employees that we changed the coffee. We think it's bad too. So we got this new brand, high-end coffee. You're all going to love it. And next time they asked a survey, participation skyrocketed because they saw that the feedback was valued, and they took action. And then importantly, they circled that back to employees that we listened, we heard, we're taking action on it. And the more that you can follow that cycle, then you can keep adding on listening strategies. But if you can't respond quickly, don't add it on out of the gate.
Yeah, and it sounds like, with the analogy that you just gave right there, regardless of the perceived significance of the question, if you respond to it and take action, then that's only going to increase engagement going forward, right?
Absolutely. It creates that positive flywheel effect, and you get really strong participation rates. It's the organizations who are asking, but not taking the feedback and acting on it. They're the ones that we see engagement keeps declining, participation rates keep declining. And what you're really saying implicitly to your employees is you don't really value their feedback. This is more of a check the box to say you do something.
Yeah, no, appreciate that. So yeah, we are out of time now, and thanks for pointing out that they can follow you, and then we can follow up with you later. They can follow you on LinkedIn, and we can get some additional questions to you and get those back, and then everybody can understand that the platform is actually open until March 12th at about 11:45 p.m. So we can get some additional questions in there. So thanks again, Brett. Love the discussion about the listening strategies, and particularly with the importance of it right now. It's never been greater. And I also like how you explained that the importance about utilizing a firm instead of really trying to launch your own strategies can probably lead to some unnecessary mistakes. So thanks so much again for joining us today. We'll see you at the panel.
All right. My pleasure. Thank you, Bobby.